Welcome to today's webinar. This presentation is being recorded and will run approximately 60 minutes, including question and answer time at the end, and will also be available in the Events Industry Council Knowledge Hub. All attendees today will receive their CE credits approximately 1 week after the webinar. Before I turn things over to our presenters, I would like to address a few logistical items. Attendees can listen to the webinar through their computers or by dialing in using the number and passcode provided by the Zoom software. If you have questions, you do not need to wait until the end of the presentation to submit them. We encourage you to submit your questions using the questions box seen on the screen. We'll address as many questions as we can by the end of the presentation. We also welcome you to utilize the closed captioning function. Click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen and you'll be able to find the link to the subtitles. And now I'd like to hand things over to the CEO of Events Industry Council, Amy Calvert. Amy?
Thank you, Sarah. So welcome everyone. People are starting to join us. We have a great group today. I want to thank all of our participants, and I'd love to also just take a moment to thank this amazing group of volunteer leaders that you see before you. I couldn't be more grateful to them and to the entire group of the Apex COVID Business Recovery Task Force for all the amazing work that they've done on behalf of our industry. I'm truly, truly grateful for everything you've done and all of your support and leadership. Sarah, we can go to the next slide. That we wanted to just start off today's discussion. We're certainly going to get into the heart of the topic today, which is the guide that's just been released around hotel and venue accommodations. But we wanted to start off by sharing this slide just as a reminder of the Events Industry Council's member organizations. I think this is a really powerful slide because it articulates the not only the scale and the reach of our organizations, you know, over 100,000 individual professionals that we serve. You know, we are truly a global organization, and I think now more than ever, the unity that is represented under the umbrella of this federation is truly important to call out, and the commitment that all of our member organizations have made to serving their various stakeholders through this time, whether it be through, you know, education or a commitment to, you know, resources around developing upskilling and reskilling opportunities for our workforce. I'm just truly grateful for the work that they've done. And what's really been fantastic through this process of the Apex Task Force is the ability to aggregate these resources and to share them in a really organized fashion with the industry. So the genesis of this COVID Recovery Task Force really is grounded in the history of the Apex Commission, and that the beauty of that is that over the years, subject matter experts have convened to share their knowledge and their passion around a particular issue that we needed to work on collectively. I think that's the important thing, that, you know, obviously together, whether it's through a time of crisis such as the one we're going through, or just generally to help advance the industry, there is such power in this level of collaboration. And so we decided, you know, when we came together back in February, that we really needed to reignite the Apex Commission and form this task force. And we really had a global mindset, and we wanted to make sure that we had all the sectors represented in the supply chain. But really the mission was to come together on behalf of the 26 million individuals that work in our industry and help them at a time that was truly critical. And so again, you know, today is about the work that this task force has done. Mike's going to talk a little bit about, you know, the focus of the task force, but really we were concerning ourselves with aggregating, curating, and contextualizing resources. And I think that's a really important piece to share with this group, because at the end of the day, you know, we're all really struggling with not only how to make sense of all the information that's available and learn how we leverage it to move forward. We all are really starved for time, and I think the work that's being done from that perspective to put it in a single location where it's easily accessible and easy to navigate is really important element, and all of this information can be found on our website. So the task force itself, again, has been really following a sort of a dual path, focusing on resources that are needed in the here and now, and, you know, aggregating additional information and insights about, you know, adaptations that are needed as we start to rebuild and restart the industry. And we really do believe that the events industry, the business events industry, is going to be critical to the restarting of our global economy, and we're continuing to try to tell the best story about this industry that we know and love. And this group has done fantastic work to help in that regard. So today our moderator is Mr. Scott Beck, whom many of you know and love, I'm sure all of you. It's my pleasure to really to turn the reins over to Scott, and he's going to introduce this fantastic panel and take us through the rest of the program. Scott?
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for everything you're doing on behalf of our industry. It's really great as a recovering hotelier to be on this panel, and I'm back with my people. It's inspiring. So I'm going to quickly do some introductions, and as I go through your name, just give everybody a wave so they can recognize who you are, and then we'll jump right into the panel. So you've met Amy, one of our panelists. I want to introduce Michael Dominguez, chair of the Apex COVID-19 Task Force and president and CEO of Associated Luxury Hotels International. Next is Mary Kreins, Senior National Sales Director for the Disney Meetings and Events and the Walt Disney Company. Then we have Frank Passanante, Senior Vice President, Hilton Worldwide Sales, Americas. Tammy Routh, Senior Vice President of Global Sales for Marriott International. And then Liz Warwick, who is also part of the Apex Recovery Task Force, chairing the Meetings and Event Design Working Group. And her day job is Vice President, Meetings and Management and Event Strategy for Liberty Mutual Insurance. So first, Michael, let's start with you. Clearly, I want to give a big thanks for your continued leadership for our industry. I think we all know when you're involved, it's not going to be the same old, same old. There's going to be a lot of critical thinking behind the strategy. So can you tell us about the goals for the task force and provide an overview of the strategy behind the guidance that's being provided?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Scott. I mean, it's always I always say it's always a privilege to serve a industry and community I love so much. And so, Scott, I think it's appropriate too that everybody here right now is a recovering hotelier. When you look at 2020, it is an interesting year for sure. Like the task force, and Amy said it brilliantly, is that the task force was really, its thought process was how can we aggregate, and I think when we say curate, it's really important. We know that people have stakeholders that they are having to communicate a vision. They're going to have to communicate a path forward. And how do you do that in a very succinct fashion and be able to show them that this can be done? And we knew that was the critical part, but there was so much information out in the industry and a lot of good work. I must say that sometimes it seems like there's just so much being thrown out there. There was a lot of good work moving very quickly, and this entire time frame has been so fluid. But the goal of the task force was to bring all that together and know that you have a single point of reference and a single place to go to answer all those questions. And I think what was really important is how the task force started to think of the work in work streams. I think that's very different than a lot of the work we've done, where these work streams are going to all be released. They fit together, but they're very different discussions. And I think sometimes the challenges are, and we've all seen it through this, through this crisis, is our industry is so broad, so wide, has many tentacles. How do you make sense of all of that? And I think that has probably been, to me, the most exciting thing to see of this task force, take it in basically different work streams to say we have to be very focused on what that work looks like. When we look at the work that we've done here with this group specifically, it is around the hotel protocols, and I'm probably most encouraged, and you heard Amy say the organizations are all together to speak with one voice. So is the hotel community. And it was so refreshing to see all of these hotel companies saying, look, we've got to get it right together. It's about earning trust and earning the confidence of the traveler, the attendee, and knowing that we're not going to do that in individual pieces. And a lot of that good work you're going to see here. There's a couple of our committee members that couldn't be with us today because of other commitments, but it's important to notice that everybody contributed so much in different work streams, and we try to cover all different areas. And what you're going to find is there is a baseline, and then there is a lot of nuance depending on where you live and what the regulations are, and that's globally and both around the world and in the United States. Even in the U.S., depending on what state, what county, what city, it could look and feel a little different depending on what the requirements are. And what we try to do is look at, here's a standard baseline, and then on top of it, here are the things you can expect as you go from area to area. So that is literally how we looked at the work. That is a higher overview of what we looked at from the task force. And I'm excited to be able to show the product with this group and then get into a discussion about the work that was done.
Thanks, Michael. Liz, I'm going to take the opportunity to throw this next question to you. Or are we going to go through the book, Michael? What's the plan? Do you want to go through the guidebook, or do you want to go to Liz?
Yeah, we should probably go through the guidebook quickly. We'll do a high overview and know that this is what the discussion is going to revolve around, and realize the plan is to go through very quickly to show you the different components and what the thought process is, but not to go page by page. You're going to see the pages, but we'll do it in sections. So if we'll throw up the guidebook, we'll do that. We'll go through that now, and we can start. And I think it's important. I want to applaud what EIC has done. The flipping book and that model and what we've been able to do, and what you're going to see here is starting to bring in video assets into the other work we've done. I think it's just brilliantly put together, and you're going to see how all of the pieces come together and how it becomes a uniformed library, for a lack of a better word, of resources. And visually you're going to see that, and I think the work is going to complement that. But we'll go through the flip book. We'll start. The beginning of the flip book is, if we can open it up. There we go. The beginning of the flip book is very consistent, and we think this is important because people may be using the books in different pieces, and somebody may be using the meetings and events book and not necessarily the hotel protocol or the hotel safety book at the same time. So what you're looking at is there's going to be consistency. Identifying the EIC, its important work, what APEX is. There'll be a table of contents, and a lot of those resources will be consistent through all the different books. You can go to the next section. We have a wonderful forward and intro from Amy, talking about the work and the need and what that looks like. And then a forward. Each one of these books will have a forward from the work group. And that work group will be telling you what the thought process is. We can go to the next page. Then we get an introduction into this book. There are sustainable development goals that are overarching in all the work we're doing, and Amy's going to cover that a little bit later in the webinar. So we can go to the next page. And then we get into the principles and what we looked at from specifically the hotel work. And you can see the accepted practices of areas of focus, and it had to do with transmission barriers, enhanced sanitation, health screening, and then food and beverage protocols. And I think it's important. You're going to see this through the book and through the work that we continue to release. It's from what we know right now. It's very fluid. We know things will change, but this is literally a snapshot in time. Next page. And then you'll see they're in this book as well, and I really do like this. There's a service blueprinting for the line of visibility, and we talk about one of the biggest shifts through this entire environment is that hotels have always cleaned very well. A lot of it has been invisible. It's behind the scenes, and there is a need and a focus now for things to be very, very central and very visible. And this will work through visibility in different segments, not just on the hotel cleaning side. It goes through an exercise that is from Harvard Business Review that is a little bit customized to our area, which I think is really well done. The next page, and there's 2 pages in a row that will talk about questions you should be asking and questions you should be considering. Then we also took a baseline of existing protocols. AHLA and their Stay Safe program is a standard baseline that all hotels are meeting as the base. But then we also looked at GBEC and what they're doing. If you'll turn the page, we go into IAC and what that work looks like, and then even the International Labor Organization and what those standards are. And then the next few pages, and we can flip through them quickly, you'll see are the different areas of the hotels and the focus that we've looked at. Everything from back of the house, laundry, in-room dining, food and beverage, there's restaurants. You'll see entertainment is covered, casino areas are covered, bars and lounges. There is a lot of protocols, and you can see a lot of work that went into this. So we tried to organize it, and candidly, I think that was probably the biggest challenge, was the organization of how do you put this into bite sizes that everybody can easily consume. And then we said this from the beginning. We want to be a single point of resource, a reference. The resources are here, and it's something I continue to stress with people. When you are in the flip book, these links are live, and you'll see these resource guides that will take you to the different hotel companies and what they are doing. There's a World Health Organization resource for the hotel sector. If you'll continue to flip, there's going to be other resources, but to the right here is where I said I was really excited that we actually have video assets for you as well. So if you're wanting to know what a specific hotel company is doing and they've put a video together to be able to show you, it's going to live here in a resource. And the beauty of these digital assets, it's easy for us to continue to add to it and to continue to revise. So that's going to be an important part as we continue to move forward. And you can continue to flip through that. You'll see more video assets, these webinars that we have been doing, and all of the great education and work that the EIC is doing is going to live here as well as a resource revolving around all of the COVID recovery. And then you can flip again. And we are then getting into other resources from global, multinational, and national public health agencies. And we all know this is what's very fluid. So for this to live in one place and continue to grow, I think will be very helpful for everyone that's a part of this webinar. And then the next slide will show you basically the task force, the organizations that are part of EIC, and then you can flip, and we're kind of closing out the book at that point with reminding us the power of our meetings industry, why it's important, and then our vision and values that were part of our APEX task force that has been part of our guiding principles. So that's the book. Scott, I will leave it there.
Thanks, Michael. So Liz, those of us who are close to this process recognize you as a true trailblazer. You and your team led out on the first guidebook. So this is the second EIC guidebook. Can you tell us a little bit how the two guides are interrelated?
Sure. Thanks, Scott, and thanks for having me as part of the panel today. I would probably step back even one more step and say that EIC really had the vision of these multiple work streams all had to be connected in one way. And they've done a great job of doing that through a couple of different elements. One is format. So you'll see when you go and take a look at our ebook on the meeting and event design, the format, the color scheme, the headers, things are very similar, and they're also compatible. So it makes it user-friendly, I think, for anyone using multiple workbooks. It's easy to follow, and that was the intent, to make it user-friendly. I think in particular, the work that Mike's team led and my team, we know that there was so much of an overlap with the hotel function piece as well as the meeting and event design. And so we focused on what are the elements that are similar across these two ebooks. And I would say the first one, and it's fundamental to all the work that I think the work streams are doing is, and you've heard this from Amy, is reestablishing trust. And so these ebooks are meant to be tools that meeting planners and hoteliers can use to help guide the conversation of when it's safe to bring meetings back face to face. And that health and safety concerns are not a barrier to bringing meetings back. I think a few other things that these two ebooks in particular are aligned on is they're flexible and adaptable. So no matter what city, state, or country you're in, it's designed through a lens that it can be used no matter where you are. So that should be very helpful, since we know through Amy's organization, we have over 30 organizations that are part of this. So regardless of hotel brand, regardless of meeting planning company, regardless of whether you're government, corporate, nonprofit, these are tools that can be used by everyone. I think another piece in terms of alignment of these two books, one is around attendee experience. Even though I think we've all been focused on attendees and how critical they play, the role that they play on the work that we do, I think one thing that rose to the top of the sort of discussion and planning piece for all our work is the attendee now has a more critical role to play in creating that safe and healthy environment. And that's addressed in both Mike's ebook on hotels accepted practices, as well as the meeting and event design accepted practices. And then two other things finally to kind of close it out. There's recommended protocols in both books. And there's additional resources, as Mike mentioned, that we're just so grateful. There are so many entities across the globe that have contributed to providing more resources in there. So at the end of the day, I think what we wanted to do was build credibility, that we're giving you tools that you can use. And it's built on really science. What's the most recent science out there? But it's got room to be adaptable as the science evolves. And also, what's the sentiment? How do we rebuild that trust so attendee sentiment, stakeholders, key decision makers really feel that we're ready and it's safe and we know the steps that we have to take to bring meetings back face to face. So I'm thrilled that the two books are aligned. Mike, our two teams have had a lot of discussion and also within the bigger framework of EIC. And we're excited that these two ebooks rolled out sequentially the way they did, because they definitely complement each other.
And it was amazing being on the inside of this to see them come out in such an organic way. The interconnectedness of our industry is one of the reasons why we're all in it. And so, Liz, your leadership was incredible. And I know that first guide was so important to setting the tone. So thank you for all your work. Speaking of the attendee experience, I'd like to go to Mary. Clearly, COVID-19 has forced a change on the attendee experience. Disney has always been at the forefront of experience. So in addition to a focus on health and safety, how do we as an industry continue to focus on the human engagement aspect that is so vital to what we do?
Thanks, Scott. That's a great question. You know, our industry is really built on crafting world-class travel experiences for our guests. And even during COVID, the experience still matters. And that isn't going to change, but it will look different. You know, you mentioned that our industry is focused on safety and well-being, and that's not only for our guests, but really also for our workforce. But as Mike mentioned, some of the great things in place were already there. The great experiences and services that we had in place are being enhanced. Technology, for example, where we can provide a contactless check-in and check-out options. We are exploring mobile order options. You can look at QR codes on menus. You can open your guest room with your smartphone. Live chats with service staff. Those things were there. They're just being enhanced, and that will continue to always lead to a better experience even past COVID. You'll see focuses on new and creative, unique food and beverage options and custom meeting designs that not only layer in safety measures, but I think it's important that we're looking at the understanding of why we meet with to begin. People want to experience the things that our industry delivers. They want engagement, they want human energy, and we can shrink the size of our world when we come together. And I don't know about you, I'm feeling a little over-zoomed. I love the occasional cattail that comes in or the neighbor's landscaper for a distraction. And while the virtual options are available, they will not replace the need and the desire for people to gather and connect. And travelers are resilient and they will adapt. So our industry will always continue to deliver meaningful and welcoming experiences. We're just going to do it in a different way for now.
Thanks, Mary. I love the idea of the way technology can facilitate what we do. And there's, I think part of it is there's always got to be something on the other end, another person to communicate with, and such a vital part of what we do. I'd like to go to Frank for a moment. So one of the developments in the past few months has been to take existing strong practices and create some really unique and expanded collaborations. So what are you learning from these collaborations, and how are they helping and responding to the evolving needs of the attendees and the guests? And Frank, I'll just ask you to go off of mute there. I know you've been eloquent, and now we want to hear you.
Excellent. That was probably a good clue. Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon, everybody. Listen, there's another really great question. So, from the absolute earliest conversations that we've had with customers, we've heard loud and clear that they were in need of clear and easy to digest details, around hotel cleanliness policies and procedures. It's interesting because, in those early conversations, it also confirmed what we heard from Mary and Liz, that they also were seeking guidance, and leader overall event experience, and we can't lose sight of that. But ultimately, for travel to resume, and for this specific audience, restore live events, it's absolutely imperative that we're able to instill confidence, trust, and provide assurances that we have the necessary protocols in place and that we're ready. So that kind of identified and highlighted a dual need. Number one, it highlighted the need that we needed to really expose the already existing high standards of hygiene and sanitation that were already in place in our hotels, but also to build upon that a bit, to address the real-time issues we're facing with COVID, and to ultimately ensure that guests can enjoy an even cleaner and an even safer stay. So, you've all seen a variety of programs and initiatives that have been introduced by many hotel companies. And they're all in the flip book. You saw that that Mike just went through. And the real key thing, and you mentioned it, Scott, is in elevating on those base level standards, there was some really important and exciting collaboration. For instance, consultation with renowned medical institutions to develop elevated processes, quality assurance, team member training. There was a huge opportunity that we've been able to leverage to really leverage the trusted know-how and a very scientific approach to cleaning practices and products. Also, you'll see collaborations or partnerships, with other organizations, partners, and quite frankly, well-known brands that actually continue to provide further assurance and build confidence, for our guests. So as I mentioned, ultimately, listen, I think Liz just said it, travel, live events, unstoppable. It's an unstoppable force. But ultimately right now, for travel to resume, we have to provide and instill that sense of trust, confidence, and assurance. So some of these, consultations and these collaborations, they've helped pave the way. And it's us being transparent and providing communication around them that's really been helping the customers understand, how we can get back to the business of live events.
Thanks, Frank. And we're in uncharted territory, and we all want a trusted guide. And then the way that the way that brands have come together to collaborate and really expand the idea to have a trusted resource has been powerful. And I think it'll be one of the things we take away from this whole time as we move the industry forward. And as you said, we will move forward. So Amy, I want to kind of jump back to you for just a minute. First off, what a time to be at the helm of the Event Industry Council. And like I said to Michael, I want to thank you, Amy, on behalf of our industry for your determination, your tenacity, of course, your style in providing such strong leadership for our path to recovery. So it is clear that there's a strong foundation to this path that you've laid out. So can you tell us about the principles for recovery that are guiding this journey?
Absolutely. I think we're going to bring them up so we can have a little bit of a visual guide. But, as if we talked about today on this this call, it really is foundational to all that we're doing right now to sort of meet people where they are and to have a real true commitment to empathy and to this journey of rebuilding trust, And I think that one of the things that we like to think about and to discuss, in considering the challenges that we all face and understanding and appreciating how difficult this time is for so many, this commitment to resilience and to inspiring hope for our workforce. And, I do believe, and I do believe it in my heart, and I know, our leaders, our federation leaders, and so many others are really committed to, using this as an opportunity to be an industry that's better understood and better celebrated and better supported, and to come out of this even stronger than we were, prior to the pandemic. And there's certainly some learnings, and I think the principles themselves, reflect that commitment and that determination to do just that, to showcase to the world that we are an industry that touches the lives of so many people. So we don't only drive business outcomes, we build and serve communities. And, we have a really steadfast commitment to sustainability and to drive towards, greater social justice. And I think that now more than ever, we need to kind of be grounded in these principles and to be able to use this document as a resource internally as a professional, I think is going to be really relevant. And again, I think it just affirms our commitment to, a global mindset, sustainability and social impact, and committing to, being on a journey to turn vision into action there. We obviously are concerned with our workforce and safety and the livelihood and well-being of the people, particularly on the front line. We're an industry that's focused on experiences, and I think oftentimes we lose sight of the people that are, responsible for executing on the vision of those experiences, and it takes a team, and those of us that have worked in hotels and worked in cities and worked in a variety of capacities understands the interconnectedness of that. And I think then, it goes back to what else do we need as professionals to learn from this experience, to grow and to gain additional insights that help us on our professional journey. So that's really what these are all about. And so we're excited. I think that they're going to be useful and relevant, and we intend to incorporate them into all of the work streams and, take a bit of time in the curation process to share with the, the industry how we think these principles apply to the various resources that we're sharing. So.
Thanks, Amy. It's also been wonderful to watch our industry engage so strategically with WHO and WPTC, and just see all of your leadership of those worldwide organizations. And our industry is a worldwide industry, and it's been incredible to see those that same ethos and those values reflected in what we're doing. So
I think that the leadership there has just been tremendous, and we're reaching out beyond our normal sphere and circles to learn and to engage. And I have a friend who works for an organization that talks about, now we have an opportunity to have a collective consciousness as we go forward and learn from one another. And I think this pandemic shows us more than I think we've ever really understood the interconnectedness and the global nature of what we do.
Well, I would certainly say you've that old analogy of never let a good crisis go to waste. You've clearly focused on the opportunity that has been created by this. And again, thank you for all you're doing. I'd like to kind of bring Tammy in now. So the work of this task force is focused on providing real solutions for our industry. And as a recovering hotelier and a Marriott hotelier at that, I know this is something that you and your teams do for your clients on a daily basis. One of the sections that Mike mentioned is a series of questions to guide conversations between hotels or venues and event organizers. So Tammy, can you share why you felt this was an important element for this guidebook?
Most certainly. Again, great to be with everybody today. I loved what Amy said in the beginning. I wrote it down, and we are all starved for time. And that has to do a lot with, first of all, we're all trying to figure out something we've never dealt with before, but we're also doing it with reduced workforces. And so we felt that this guidebook, and the reason we all chipped in, is that we need to make it easy for everyone, the whole ecosystem of the travel industry, and then in this case, the hotel industry, and just make it really easy where people can go in and find tips, questions, best practices, what's a particular hotel company doing, just make it really easy for everyone. But with that said, what I've always reflected back on, that's like table stakes to just get you some of that. But at the end of the day, the relationships, and I think Frank mentioned it earlier, collaboration is going to be the key to us moving forward. And I think about it like this. I think what we got a little maybe used to in a market that was very busy and the economy was doing well is group sourcing and contracting in hotels became really transactional. If we're on both sides, think about that. We would use technology, we would send the specs over, send it back, contract it. That's not going to work now. We're going to need to use these guidelines as very thought-provoking, open-ended questions where we sit at the table and we admit to each other where you need to be vulnerable and say, none of us are really sure how to do this, but together we can be assured we're going to get meetings moving again. We're going to have to be transparent, collaborative, try new things together, shared risk, shared reward. And I think the guidelines will be a great way to start that dialogue. I think Liz also mentioned something very important in hers, is that this is also going to require us to think differently about how we communicate, pre-communication, during the event, and post. How are we going to make sure that everyone that's involved, the hotel, the meeting attendees, the meeting planners, are crystal clear on their role in the success of this? But I'm actually, we've said this on this a couple times, but I'm very optimistic. I think there's other people that are like, meetings aren't going to come back for a long time. You know, they're going to come back gradually, but with this collective group that's on the phone in the broader industry, I'm really confident we will bring meetings back safely and, you know, as timely as the governments allow around the world. But it's going to take a village, and it's going to take everybody being incredibly empathetic with the other party to figure out how you get to a win-win. I'm going to turn it back.
Thanks, Tammy. I love that you brought empathy in there, because that is, you know, such an important element to a lot of what we're talking about. And again, even to building trust, that's such an important part of it. And I am all in on this industry coming back in full force. I not only do I welcome your enthusiasm, I share it, and I am with you 100% on driving that forward. So I'm going to go now to sort of a question to the group. It's to each of you, and so I'll start with Mary. And so I don't mean to associate the pandemic with our organizations, but you know, the pandemic knows no borders. It's a global pandemic. You all represent organizations that have a global reach. You know, so first, Mary, how are you adapting the guidance to the different regions that are represented in terms of your organization?
Sure. So you are right. This is a very global issue, and each of those regions has different nuances that kind of play into how we approach it from those angles. The one thing that we learned, though, that was a little more universal from a global standpoint was that it gave us confidence that people were willing to abide by protocols. It gave us confidence. Okay, learn technology. It gave us confidence to move forward. That while it started globally and before it moved to the United States, we were able to look at best practices that fell into those regions and bring those forward, and that people would abide by the protocols. So that was a really important step in looking forward and moving forward with confidence.
Michael, we've been friends for a long time, and I've not only personally but social media, so I know you are all over this planet. So what have you seen, sort of different aspects to this regionally as you've traveled?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because it's in a couple of components. I see a lot of the same actions being taken, but they look and feel a little bit different. But the purpose is the same. And that's where I think for those that have not traveled and experienced it, it's one of the reasons I've been doing it, is to really try to find out, what does it look like? What does it feel like? It's pretty consistent. And the difference might be whether somebody is taking my temperature with a kiosk, or whether it's somebody, you know, with what looks like a small thermometer coming at me, taking my temperature. It just varies from place to place. And then there's some that are actually asking you to make sure you're self-aware of where you're at. I've even been given these little digital thermal thermometers to take to my room to make sure I'm being asked every day to take my temperature first thing in the morning. There's all kinds of differences to it, but there's some normalcy as well as I've gone around. And I want to echo what Mary said. I find people to be compliant. Everybody's very respectful of space today. And it's hard for me, and I started personally traveling about 8 weeks ago, going to our hotels and looking at what was going on. At that time, masks weren't universal. I didn't see everybody with masks. Today, it is hard to find anybody that's not wearing a mask. You know, my biggest concern now, or the biggest commentary, is making sure they're wearing them right, but they have the mask on. and that's that next step. We're teaching them how to wear a mask. Through this thing, we all learn how to wash our hands because most of us weren't doing it correctly. So I think that's the important part, because for people to, and you've heard me say this before, sometimes I think what is being the snapshot and clickbait in social media and or media is not what is the general rule that you were seeing when you're out and about. And the best advice I could give people, before you make a judgment, please make sure you've experienced it. Because when you see it and experience it, it's not necessarily what is being represented. And I will echo what Mary said. It doesn't matter where I've gone. People are being very respectful and very cognizant of the rules and compliance. And anybody not complying, I see them comply very quickly when they're asked. And I don't think that they're being non-compliant. It's just we're habitual. We have these habits that have been in place for, I guarantee you, the first time I see Frank or Tammy, I'm going to want to shake their hands or give them a hug. And it's hard to get out of that. And that to me is us learning. And when you talk about empathy, can we all have a little consideration that we have 20-year-old habits that we're trying to break? And I think that's the important part, to keep communicating that.
My wife always makes fun of me. I never know where my keys are to my car. Now I know where my masks are, so I have masks everywhere. Frank, clearly Hilton, a global organization, and you with a focus on the Americas. What are you seeing in terms of this adaptation regionally?
Yeah, probably just add a little bit to what's already been said. But I mentioned earlier, building trust, and providing assurances to our guests is something that's critically important. In the Reestablishing company, consistently for our customers and guests to see that we're doing things across the globe is a really important part of building that trust. So, in our case, the programs we've launched, they're global programs, so globally aligned. But it's also important to realize that there are going to be regional nuances. We all know, we're dealing with it every day, that jurisdiction by jurisdiction, there are different regulations and different things that have to be done. But again, what we are doing is, introducing things that our guests can experience consistently across the globe with just those regional nuances. The other thing I'll just add quickly, in our case, and I know my peers here probably share this as well, as it relates to COVID and as it relates to the recovery trajectory and as it relates to the issues we've all been dealing with, there have been certain world regions that have experienced things before us. And it's been really constructive as we've built out our programs to learn and listen and really see what's happened in the other world regions as we've developed programs. So there's been a real opportunity for us to take what's happening in other places and adopt. I think you said it early on, Mike, what we're showing today and the things that we've put out in the marketplace, they're going to evolve and they're going to continue to evolve. And we have the ability to really leverage the experiences across the globe, and we've been doing that.
So we have a couple minutes before we want to get to some Q&A. So Frank talked about peers. So Tammy, any additional thoughts you have on this regional adaptation that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think much to what everybody said. And by the way, Mike, you can hug me when you see me. Just wear a mask, okay? Then I'm cool with that. Yeah, I think that what might be interesting to the audience is that what we're doing is every week, and since January, think about that. That was China, started in January. It's hard to believe. We have a global call. And all disciplines are on there, whether it's sales, marketing, ops, legal. We have doctors on the line. And that's where, much to what Frank was talking about, where we start to talk about real time. So in China, what are you seeing with meetings and events? And what are you doing it so that we all learn and we share protocol? And then we also have a global cleanliness council that dictates what the global standards are going to be and the nuances. So, for example, we followed American Hotel Lodging Association with mandatory masks in the United States for not only our people, but for our guests. So it's much to, I think, and then we're just being nimble, like my peers said, is as things change, we will update, and it's our responsibility to keep our customers updated. And I'm so grateful for the EIC, because this is a way we're going to help communicate in addition to through our own sales and marketing channels. So Scott, I think would, unless there's any other questions on that.
Thanks. I do have a question. So I'm going to direct this question to Amy, but I also think, Liz, I kind of want to get your insight on this too after Amy sort of responds. I think there'd be some and you bring an interesting perspective to this. So the question, Amy, is around standards and quality assurance. So there's this, can you speak to the difference between sort of standards, guidance, and voluntary compliance?
Yeah, so full disclosure, this is not my area of expertise, right? And nor is it any of ours, really. I think what's out there are a lot of really understandable, rational, and important questions about, what is the guidance that we need to move through space and time to address the concerns that are out there, right? Standards in and of themselves are mandatory courses of action, right? And there are standards in place that have been long in existence around safety. ISO has standards around safety in the work, in a workplace, as does OSHA, and those standards are quite rightly live in those places. Our job here as industry professionals that have been long concerned with things around voluntary compliance in terms of safety and security, duty of care, is to offer guidance, right? And to provide the most comprehensive resource in terms of the global guidance that is out there right now, whether it be around health and sanitization or safety, and to be able to host conversations around that so that people are learning about the nuances between, what is that which is a standard versus that which is guidance or a protocol, even versus a policy, for instance. So I think that one of the things that we're talking a lot when we are having conversations around advocacy is that, again, we are an industry that is able to create controlled environments through our processes and our protocols and in partnership and collaboration with the entire supply chain. And we are committed to voluntary compliance. And, Liz raised this earlier as well. We're also having to take a step back and better understand and how to assess risk, as an individual, as a participant, and as an organization. And that will change over time as we have access to better science and better resources. And I think it's important to recognize that. So.
Liz, thoughts on that idea of quality assurance and standards and voluntary compliance? I know that's a world you live in on a daily basis. Yeah. How did it relate to what we're talking about?
Yeah, I would say just two thoughts. One, to build on sort of what Amy said around standards. I mean, it was intentional that EIC and our work streams selected the words accepted practices, because that's exactly what it is. And the nature of it is the science is evolving and the practices supporting that science are evolving. So for us if we had locked into a standard, that becomes very standard and inflexible for evolution. So I think knowing that the science was evolving daily, if not weekly, we all made a decision to be thoughtful on the selection of the word accepted practices, because I think it gives us wiggle room, if you will, to make adaptations to it as we learn more. So I think that's the piece around maybe accepted practices versus standards. I think the other thing on voluntary compliance, this was an interesting topic for a lot of the work streams, I think, within EIC, but for mine in particular, we thought that the hosting organization has the right to declare certain protocols are that they want to put in place to host the meeting. And especially if it's in an effort to create a healthy and safe environment. And that's really where the code of conduct sort of came out of that. Because if you start to be arbitrary on what you're allowing people to do or not do within a health and safety practice, it starts to erode the integrity of that healthy environment. So I think it's up to every organization, whether it's a trade association or corporation, to look at their own culture and to look at what they want to put in place. But if you're, at the end of the day, if your organization's footing the bill and you are the hosting organization, our group believed that you have the right to impose certain requirements in order to protect that healthy bubble. And then it's up to people if they want to subscribe to that either through a reg site or whatever on that. For us, it was the code of conduct. But if they opt out, if for some reason it doesn't work for them, they can opt out and in some cases dial in virtually. So I think we gave an element of opting out but still participating. But the preference would be that the hosting organization is offering this as a way to maintain the integrity on a healthy environment.
And Scott, I think I would just add that this is something that, as we come out of this crisis, it is an important element to think about in terms of, again, going back to the participant experience and how do we ensure, commitment as an individual and as an organization to wellness. And so I think that, as, again, an important topic for us to be thinking about and discussing, as industry professionals on a regular basis.
I think it's really compelling, this idea of a code of conduct and how attendees, participants, but I also recognize that there is the scope and scale of what is ahead of us, and the variability and the fluidity of what we're dealing with creates a lot of opportunities to have some disconnects. You've heard me say I'm a recovering hotelier. I'm now in the DMO world, and I can tell you that our conversations have dramatically shifted, where in many instances we're advocating on behalf of our clients like Liz, less about the attendees, but on behalf of the organizations that are coming to our communities, because there are so many variables to deal with. And I would maybe look, again, I've come from the sales background in the hotel world, so kind of looking to Tammy and Frank and Mary on this one, but what advice can we give the participants in terms of, if they're having a struggle, getting the attention, getting some of the things that they feel they need and they want for their event at a hotel or a venue? Clearly I would advocate that they have an opportunity to engage their DMO that's in that community to help advocate for them. But I would also suspect, Tammy, that you have that sort of advocacy built in as well with your organization. So if there's an event planner struggling to get a CSM assigned or get some element of attention, give the participants some advice on how they could advocate for what they need, sort of scaling up as their need rises.
I'm glad you did. I saw that in the questions, and I think that is a very important one. Mary and Frank, please jump in here if it's different for your company. But I think that when we go back to that empathy discussion, we had a lot of our event managers furloughed around the world or on severely reduced work weeks. And they're just starting to come back as business is starting to build, so that the owners and the franchisees and the general managers, they're bringing them back. So I say this I think you might have been experiencing, at least with us, that it wasn't as responsive. You didn't feel like people were maybe reaching out to you because literally people weren't working, hotels were closed. What we're doing in the event management space is we're bringing people back, and we're getting them quickly ramped up into this new world they're entering. Think about that. If you haven't been working for a while, this isn't what you left. And so what I would suggest to all the customers on the call is, for us, please escalate. And it could be the director of sales and marketing, it could be the general manager. Escalate. We want you to have the dialogue with us. It just may be that we still have limited staff, but they'll be there as business builds. Just don't sit back and say, nobody's responding. Please escalate, because there's nothing we want more than to collaborate and make it successful and get meetings back. But I just thought I'd mention that, because you might take for granted that those event managers are fully staffed right now. And because there's no meetings, many cases they haven't been working. So I don't know if Frank or Mary has the same experience.
I'll add a couple of things. No, you're absolutely right, Tammy. In most hotels, while there may not be individual roles that are on staff based on demand levels, there are people there. So to Tammy's, advice, absolutely escalate. But I think that, it was said earlier, listen, we all have a common objective, and that's the restore live events. And we also recognize that the path forward is one of transparency, one of flexibility, one of really establishing shared objectives. So my advice to everybody is, we are all actively engaged and ready to have those conversations. This is not going to happen without really collaborating, without really working through the very complex issues we're all dealing with. And there isn't a cookie cutter or single answer. When you go through the resources that are in the flip book, you'll see the various hotel companies have put out programs. And some of those programs are programs that are attempting to provide some playbooks. We've put out a playbook that, really is helping provide more resources to help answer some of these really complicated questions or things that perhaps you just want other people's perspective on. So leverage the resources that are out there, leverage the resources in the flip book. There's great materials there. And then that open, honest, transparent conversation. Your hotel partners are here to have them. We want to have them. We are in this together. It's really about shared objectives and working together.
Yeah, I'll echo Frank's comments and Tammy's as well. This is the time for over-communication and collaboration. And while there may not be someone you may have worked with when you started, there is definitely somebody there. So please reach out, and I'll volunteer them as well. Reach out to any of us if we can help. This is really about a time to collaborate. And I know that we will do it. I know that we will all get through this.
So I'm going to call out Tammy, escalate and empathy. You've got two key words that I think we'll take away from today. So the double E's. So I kind of, in the last bit of time we have remaining, I want to kind of throw to Amy and get just some closing thoughts about advocacy and specifically how EIC is advocating around plans for workforce resources.
So one of the things that we're doing as a very intentional part of the group's effort here, the Taskforce effort, is we have a dedicated work stream on that very topic, and looking at, a lot of terms have been bantered around the notion of upskilling and reskilling, and I think it's a bit of both. I think as individual professionals, we have an opportunity to use this time to think a little bit differently about the skills that are needed, and this task force group is looking at a couple of things, understanding that we're at a really critical time. You just heard, Tammy and Frank and Mary speak about, the nature of how their teams have been impacted. There's a tremendous amount of people that are managing through a lot of uncertainty right now. So we're trying to say, this is a time to stay connected, and we want to make resources available to individuals that are in this industry to understand how to do that. We have a lot of people that are just coming into our industry. Think about how they're thinking and feeling about what their future is. I think we have a responsibility to offer some inspiration and some hope. We are resilient. Those of us who have been around a long time have seen, us come out of difficult times previously, and certainly this is unprecedented, but the work that we're pulling together on behalf of the workforce right now is really focused on building relationships, staying connected, feeling feeling that there are resources out there to address this notion of wellness and new opportunities. And so in addition to the resources that will be available through this wellness and work stream deliverable that'll come out actually in 2 weeks, we're also going to be launching a career microsite on behalf of all of our members and our stakeholder partners. So this again will be this single source, a place for people to go to understand about new professional development opportunities, whether that's through credentialing, certificates, things of that nature. It'll also make available new career opportunities and kind of understand a little bit more about pathways. I think one of the things that's so interesting is that, you heard it today, we've all worked in hotels, I've worked for cities before, so we want to broaden everybody's awareness about possibilities there and also connect with the folks in the academic space so that we're really reaching the broadest group of industry professionals as possible. I think from an advocacy perspective, this organization, in addition to something very tangible such as that, is really helping to support the work of organizations like Go Live and U.S. Travel and Meetings Mean Business and other coalitions outside of North America to say, this is the depth and breadth of our industry, 1.5 trillion in GDP globally, 26 million professionals. Not only the direct impact, but the indirect impact. We build communities. So use our data, use our resources to help tell the story. And those organizations are doing a fantastic job of, trying to give policymakers specific examples of the impact, but also trying to humanize it and tell the story about the individual so that we get the best relief and we get the most timely relief. And, you know, things in the U.S. here now are trying, but we are also working as a group under this umbrella on advocacy and looking a bit at the relief efforts and how we can help that and encourage people to get engaged, but also looking at things like the PREA Act. You know, we really believe that we need that Pandemic Risk Insurance Act, and we all can kind of get behind that and use the various resources that we have within our organizations to help tell that story and support the efforts of those organizations that I mentioned earlier. So, you know, we want to turn this notion of advocacy sort of inside out. It's not something we should do when there's a crisis. We all want to commit to it and take an active role in advocacy on an ongoing basis and help people understand what the issues are and how to do that. So.
Well, thank you, Amy. I think we've reached our hour. I want to give a huge thank you to the panelists. Again, it was so great hanging with my hotel peeps again. And I think the one thing I would say is the only thing I know about this is what we're doing today is going to be different than what we're going to do in a week from now. And so let's take that empathy that Tammy asked us or suggested we have and know that things are going to change and we just need to find ways as professionals, as we always do, to roll and evolve with that. So I'm going to throw the time back to you, Amy, to close us up. And again, thank everybody for their participation today.
Yeah, so great job, Scott. And to this entire amazing panel, thank you for everything that you've done. I mean, I'm so inspired and grateful to all of you and to the entire task force and all of our volunteer leaders under the EIC umbrella. And thank you to our participants for joining. You know, for me to see, you know, almost 1,000 people on this call today wanting to learn, connect, and share is what it's all about. And I think that in itself is a reason to believe that we will come out of this stronger and we should have hope. And it's inspiring to me personally, and I wish you all the best. Stay well. Thank you to the team. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.
That concludes today's webinar. On behalf of Events Industry Council, I'd like to thank our presenters again. EIC will be sending out your CE credits 1 week after the conclusion of this webinar. The webinar will now end. Thank you, everyone.